Talk about Unit 21, which is ADA and fair housing. So ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act and Federal Fair Housing Act, and they're the subjects of this unit. We're going to cover topics: the ADA, American Disability Act, and we're going to cover the Federal Fair Housing Law. All right, so you'll have some independent study to do. So I'll cover the unit summary and the unit quiz. So here are some of the key terms you have to remember. Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, is a 1990 federal law that prohibits discrimination based on a person's disability and enforces consistent standards in employment. So that's Title 1. Public services is Title 2. Public accommodations is Title 3. And telecommunications is Title 4. Blockbusting is an illegal act whereby owners are encouraged to sell their properties because minorities are moving into their neighborhood. Also known as panic selling or panic peddling. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 prohibits discrimination based on race or color. There's a Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988. This prohibits discrimination due to handicap, disability status, or familial status. Familial status. So again, familiar status, what is that? That is when a protected group under the Federal Fair Housing Act, making it illegal to discriminate a person, right? It's illegal to discriminate a person because he or she is the parent or the guardian of a child less than 18 years of age, right? So, you can't discriminate against family because they have children. Federal Fair Housing Act. This is the common name for Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which is a law that prohibits discrimination in all facets of the home buying process on the basis of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, or disability. Handicap is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits or curtails one or more major life activities, also called disability. Redlining is going to be the legal process of a lender when they denying loans in certain areas of a community because of race, color, creed, or etc. Steering is when you channel, like you're guiding buyers, channeling prospective buyers or tenants to particular neighborhoods based on the race, religion, national origin, ancestry, or other legally protected classes. So say if you have some buyers and you're taking them to a particular neighborhood because of a certain race they are, and you think that that neighborhood is that particular race, that's called steering. You're steering folks into that neighborhood because of their race, which is illegal. You can't do steering. Redlining, it's different than steering. Redlining is the legal process of a lender denying loans in certain areas of the community because of race. So when you think of redlining, you want to think of the lender violating, and when you think of steering, you're in a car with a realtor, and if they're purposely driving people to a certain neighborhood, that's called steering. So that's more like a realtor violating the law. Redlining is more of a lender violating the law. So number one, which of the following is permitted under the Fair Housing Act? This one, C, not renting a house to an individual because they have a poor credit history. So which of the following is permitted under the Fair Housing Act? So that is permitted. You can judge based on credit score, and we do that a lot, right? A lot of lenders, if you have a bad credit score, they won't loan to you because you have a poor credit history. So that's okay. That's permitted under the Fair Housing Act. So what about A, advertising to special groups only? Can you advertise only to like Hispanics or anything like that? No, that type of advertising is not permitted under the Fair Housing Act. Under the Fair Housing Act, you cannot advertise to a specific group of people. What about selling or renting to a customer based on their national origin? So again, you can't. The Fair Housing Act protects national origin. It also protects special groups of people. So yeah, that's not allowed. What about telling a prospect a house has been rented when it has not? So Fair Housing Act also protects against lying to people when if you say it's rented but it's actually not. That's protected under the Fair Housing Act. Number 2, which of the following would not be a group home and not qualify for protection under the fair housing laws? So this answer is bravo. An owner-occupied home with 3 bedrooms and only 1 bathroom. So 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. That would not be a group home and not qualify for protection under the fair housing laws. So it's an owner-occupied home with 3 bedrooms and only 1 bathroom. So let's go to A, a house occupied by mentally ill persons, right? So that actually would qualify as a group home and would qualify under protection under fair housing laws, right? Mentally ill people, they can go into a group home. A home occupied by persons recovering from drug addiction, that would also qualify as a group home, and that would give you protection under the fair housing laws. A house which serves as a hospice for persons who are near death. So typically, I've had some relatives who are very, very old, 90, almost 100 years old. They go to a hospice, they're near death. That would qualify for as a group home and be protected under the fair housing law. But if you're an owner and you occupy the home and you have 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom and you live in the home, owner occupied, that wouldn't qualify. Under the Fair Housing Amendment Act of 1988, a handicapped person can be an individual in what? Would be Delta with a mental impairment that substantially limits that person from living a normal life. So under the Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988, a handicapped person can be an individual with a mental impairment that substantially limits that person from living a normal life. Again, under the Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988, a handicapped person can be an individual with a mental impairment that substantially limits that person from living a normal life. So handicap, you don't have to, but you can have a mental impairment, right? What about a handicapped person? Would a low income family qualify as a handicapped person? No. And be protected under the Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988? No. Just because you're poor, right, or you don't make enough money doesn't make you handicapped. How about B, who can't qualify for a federally guaranteed or insured loan? If you can't qualify for a loan, typically you have bad credit. So does that make you a handicapped person under the Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988? No. How about someone who's abused controlled substances over a long time? So if you've taken drugs over a long time and you don't have a mental impairment, does that make you a handicapped person? No, that wouldn't qualify under the Fair Housing Amendment Act of 1988. A sale of a single family residence by an owner who does not own more than three. All right, sale of a single family residence by an owner who does not own more than three. What? Delta, the sale of a single family residence handled by a broker. So, families with children, which of the following parties listed below would be allowed to reside in the property? So it's going to be Alpha, a 62-year-old retired doctor. So again, if a property has the right to exclude families with children, which of the following parties would be allowed to reside in the property? So it's a 62-year-old retired doctor. What about a 52-year-old employed lawyer? No. What about a 50-year-old nurse? No. What about a 54-year-old minister? No. So here the key is, I believe above 60 and it's retired, right? So the retired versus employed lawyer, employed nurse, employed minister. Those are the things to watch out for. Which of the following would not be a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act? This one would be Charlie, failure to rent an apartment to a disabled person with an assistive animal. So which of the following would not be a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act? So if you were to fail to rent an apartment to a disabled person with an assistive animal, that's not a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So what about failure to provide equal access to a real estate office for a person in a wheelchair? So that would be a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act because you need to have wheelchair access, right? What about failure of an employer who has 15 or more full-time employees to make reasonable accommodations for disabled employees? So again, when you have over 15, right, who has 15 or more full-time, then you have to make reasonable accommodations for disabled employees. What if you fail to provide parking spaces for handicapped persons at a retail shopping center? Well, you're in violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So you have to provide handicapped people with parking spaces at a retail shopping center. But what if you fail to rent an apartment to a disabled person with an assistive animal? So that would not be a violation with the American with Disabilities Act because they have that assistive animal, and you have the right to not rent them. Under what circumstances may a salesperson legally not show a minority a home in a white neighborhood? So let's go to Charlie. If the owner is out of town and has instructed the salesperson not to show the home to anyone while the owner is away. So again, if the owner's out of town and has instructed the salesperson not to show the home to anyone while the owner is away. So, I mean, it's kind of a weird way to get around it, but under what circumstances may a salesperson legally not show a minority a home in a white neighborhood? It's kind of, they're not showing anybody the home. If the owner requests don't show the home while they're not there, then they're not showing anybody. It's not tied to a particular race or anything like that. So A says never. I know it could be a trick question because you shouldn't really do that. But if the owner was typically, if the owner's out of town and they instruct the salesperson, don't show the home to anyone while the owner's away, I mean, you're not legally showing a minority a home in a white neighborhood. So, all right, B, so it's not never, and it's not when the minority has given up their rights under the 1866 Civil Rights Act. No. How about D, when the agent sincerely believes if the home is shown, there will be violence? The salesperson could try to talk to the minority into looking at houses in integrated neighborhoods. No, again, nothing like that. So I would say it's still A and C, but it's not really A because if the owner's out of town and they instruct the salesperson to not show the property, you're not really showing it to anybody. Number 8, the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968 permits a specific exemption for a what? For an owner selling a single family home himself, providing no discriminatory remarks are made in the advertising. So for B, the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968 permits a specific exemption for a owner selling a single family home himself, providing no discriminatory remarks are made in the advertising. So when you put public remarks, that's your time to basically, puff up the listing. You always want to avoid any discriminatory remarks. You stick to material facts, how many bedrooms, bathrooms. And actually ChatGPT does a great way to do the public remarks if you want to try that. So owner occupant renting a unit in an 8-plex? No. Private club restricting rental of lodging operated for commercial purposes? No. Religious group renting units only to members of a certain national origin? No. So again, owner selling a single family home himself, providing no discriminatory remarks are made in the advertising. This is where the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968 permits a specific exemption for that. So under the 1968 Civil Rights Act, how long after a discriminatory housing practice has occurred may an individual file complaint with HUD? So this one's going to be Delta, 1 year. So you have 1 year to file a complaint with HUD. So under 1968 Civil Rights Act, how long after a discriminatory housing practice has occurred may an individual file a complaint with HUD? 1 year. So how long do you have to file a complaint with HUD if you feel you were discriminated? 1 year. What if you wait 2 years? Then they won't hear your complaint, right? It's been too long. So 30 days, no. 90 days, no. 180 days, no. A property in which unrelated people who need care, support, or supervision live together and which is protected by the fair housing laws from discrimination by neighbors is a what? Is a group home. So a property in which unrelated people who need care, right? So that's already thinking group home, right? So you got unrelated people, say they're mentally ill people, or they're, like kind of a hospice, that's a group home. They all need care, support, or supervision. They live together, and which is protected by fair housing laws from discrimination by neighbors is a group home. So is it a homestead? No. A redlined home? No, we talked about that. That's where lenders are violating they're not writing loans to people in a neighborhood because of a particular race. It's opposite of steering. And a single family home? No. An owner wishes to list an expensive home, but has requested that the home be sold to Caucasians only. Under the law, the agent should what? The agent should inform the seller he cannot legally accept the listing under these conditions. So, say you become an agent, right, or you're a broker now, and your client wants you to sell only to Caucasians only. What should you do? You should tell them can't take the listing under those conditions. You could take the listing, but you'd have to be free from any discriminatory advertising, period. B, explain that it would be unlikely that non-Caucasians would be able to afford the house. No, I mean, you can explain it, but at the end of the day, you can't take that listing, right? So, advise the owners to sell it themselves. No, advertise the home solely in newspapers read by Caucasians. No, no. I mean, it comes down to you cannot take the listing. So just tell them that you can't take it. You can't legally accept the listing under those conditions. What's the unlawful practice of restricting the number of loans in certain areas is known as redlining, right? We talked about this. Redlining really deals with lenders violating, not writing loans in a particular home or area. So, say for example, they're in some neighborhood and it's like a bunch of, maybe there's demographics is like Hispanic people, then and the lender doesn't want to write loans because of that specific reason. That is called redlining. So it's an unlawful practice of restricting the number of loans in certain areas. Is known as redlining. So steering is where a realtor is violating the law by channeling or driving, their clients to a specific neighborhood because of, he thinks that they're a specific race and that neighborhood is a specific race. So you're going there just because that specific race, right? That's called steering. It's not allowed. So is it block busting? No. Panic peddling? No. Steering? No. Redlining? Yeah. An offer is brought to the seller, which conforms to the terms and conditions of the listing. The seller refuses to accept the offer because the purchasers are a minority. The salesperson can do all the following except what? So this is Delta. Write a new listing with a non-minority clause. So again, an offer is brought to the seller, which contains the terms and conditions of the listing. Right? An offer is brought to the seller, which conforms to the terms and conditions of the listing. The seller refuses to accept the offer because the purchasers are a minority. So he doesn't want to accept the deal because they're a minority. So the salesperson, right, can do what? Well, they can write a new listing with a non-minority clause. So it can do all the following except that. So they can't do that, right? They can do all A, B, and C except D, right? So let's look at A. So A is advise the buyers that they may file a complaint with HUD. Yeah, you got 1 year to do that, right? You can sue the seller for the full commission. And yeah, that's a pretty good idea. You can warn the seller that this is in violation of the Fair Housing Act. So, typically you don't really know the buyers. So when they submit an offer, you don't know that, they're of a particular minority. But if you did and you didn't want to accept it because of that reason, you could advise the buyers that they file a complaint with HUD. You got a year to do that. You can sue the sellers for the full commission, and you can warn the seller that this is in violation of the Fair Housing Act. But you could not write a new listing with a non-minority clause. That would not be legal. 14, familiar status. As it is defined in the Fair Housing Amendment Act of 1988, prohibits housing discrimination against Bravo, families with children under the age of 18. So, again, familial status, as it is defined in the Federal Housing Amendment Act of 1988, prohibits housing discrimination against against families with children under the age of 18. So you cannot discriminate a family because they have children, or they have say they have a kid, two kids, they're under 18. They're protected against the Fair Housing Amendment Act of 1988. How about parents or legal guardian with dependent children? Right? Does it prohibit housing discrimination against parents or legal guardian with dependent children? No. How about a household unit where at least one member is over 55? No. So age is not dealing with the familial status, right? I'm sorry, over 18, right? Doesn't there's no protection, right? Children living with their grandparents, no. So it's just families with children under the age of 18. According to the Federal Fair Housing Act, as amended in 1988, if HUD determines that a person shows reasonable cause to believe that a discriminatory act has been committed, what must HUD do? So B, attempt conciliation to resolve the dispute. Right? So HUD is going to attempt to concile and resolve the dispute. That's what HUD must do. What about first determine the amount of money damages involved? No. Suspend the salesperson license? No, they don't have that power, right? The commissioner has that power. Hold all inquiries until at least 2 or more complaints have been filed? No. So according to the Federal Fair Housing Act, as amended in 1988, if HUD, right, determines that a person shows reasonable cause to believe that a discriminatory act has been committed, what must HUD do? They need to attempt to resolve the dispute. So HUD will attempt to resolve that dispute. A tenant with a handicap asks her landlord for permission to modify her dwelling unit. The landlord can what? Bravo, require the tenant to restore the interior to the original condition at the end of the tenancy. So, again, you have a tenant, they have a handicap, and ask her landlord for permission to modify her dwelling unit. So, say they have like a ramp and they're in a wheelchair and they want to make a ramp in their house. The landlord can permit that, but then can also require that, when they're ready to give their notice, ready to move out, that they have to take the ramp back out, right? Can they charge a larger than customary security deposit so money will be available to restore the unit to its original condition where the tenant moves out? No. So you can't charge more because they're disabled. Require the tenants to restore the interior? Yeah. Require the tenant to move out if she isn't comfortable? No, you have to have a reasonable accommodation. You have to be able to allow them to make their modification, but they have to, you can make it required so that when they move out, it's restored to the original condition. Can you deny the request for no reason? No, right? So Americans with Disabilities Act, where tenants are protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. A commercial building has a handicap parking space, bathroom, which are accessible to the handicapped, and 3 steps leading to the front door have a handrail. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, the building, what? Bravo, the building needs a ramp to make the property wheelchair accessible. So under the American with Disabilities Act, the building needs, right, requires a ramp to make the property wheelchair accessible. So again, a commercial building has handicap parking spaces, bathrooms which are accessible to the handicap, and all 3 steps leading to the front door have a handrail. So under the Americans with Disability Act, the building needs a ramp to make the property wheelchair accessible. So A says, is in full compliance. C, no, cannot be sold until it is in full compliance. No, must obtain approval from HUD. No. So it just needs a ramp to make the property wheelchair accessible. 18, a real estate ad for a home states this. So here's the public remarks, right? This is a beautiful 2-story home in a Hispanic neighborhood. Red flag. On 4 acres with 0% down. Another red flag. Monthly payments of $12.75 PITI for 30 years at 4% interest. Red flag. No points and an APR of 4.1%. Okay, that's good. This ad is in violation of which law? This one's going to be, bravo, the Federal Fair Housing Act. And how come? Well, you have the word Hispanic neighborhood, so you're discriminating against Hispanics in your public remarks. So that's going to go against the Federal Fair Housing Act. Fair housing, right? Fair housing meaning, you can't discriminate against a particular race, right? So is it the Truth in Lending law? No. Is it the Real Estate Settlement and Procedures Act, RESPA? No. Is it the Fair Credit Reporting Act? No. A religious organization that owns a cooperative building hires a realty company to rent out the units. The realty company is instructed not to rent to anyone who is not a member of the organization's faith. The realty company denies occupancy to a family with one member of a different faith. This is allowed under the fair housing laws because what? Because religious organizations are allowed to restrict tenants to members of that faith. So again, this is allowed. You can deny somebody because of the faith that they choose. A religious organization owns a cooperative building, hires a realty company to rent out the units. Right. So say you're going to go rent at a co-op, a religious organization building. The realty company is instructed not to rent to anyone who is not a member of this organization's faith. So say they're all, Christian, and you only can rent to Christians, right? Can they do this? Yeah. It's allowed under the fair housing law because it's a faith-based rental organization. So it is, Charlie, religious organizations are allowed to restrict tenants to members of that faith. So A, religion is not a protected class. No, it is a protected class, religion. So you can rent to people based on their religion. Charities are exempt. No. Cooperative buildings are exempt. No. So it's, religious organizations are allowed to restrict tenants to members of that faith. The unlawful practice of channeling prospective buyers away from a particular area is known as steering. Bravo, right? So steering is when a realtor, they're driving, or they're going to particularly steer their buyers to a particular neighborhood because of a particular race. That's called steering. Is it blockbusting? No. Panic peddling? No. Harassment? No. So steering is unlawful practice of channeling prospective buyers away from or to a particular area because of their race. It's called steering. The Federal Fair Housing Act protects what? B, married women. So Federal Fair Housing, right? Federal Fair Housing Act protects married women and age as well. right? Familiar status under the, families with children under the age of 18. That's Federal Fair Housing Act. So, does it protect students? No. Does it protect migrant workers? Federal Fair Housing Act? No. Does the Federal Fair Housing Act protect military people? No. So, Federal Fair Housing protects married women and also familiar status. A young woman with a visual impairment wants to live in an apartment building with her seeing eye dog. The building has a no pet policy, right? No pet policy. The landlord can do what? Bravo must allow her to rent, but can require her to restore any damage the dog has done at the end of her tenancy. So, yeah, good luck doing that, right? So, it's hard to get some tenants to do their stuff at the end of it. It's a challenge, but you can require it. So they must allow her to rent, but can require her to restore any damage the dog has done at the end of her tenancy. So again, a young woman with a visual impairment, they want to live in an apartment building with their seeing eye dog. The building has a no pet policy. The landlord must, right? So even if you have a no pet policy, can you deny a disabled person because they have an assistive seeing dog? No, you can't deny that. So you have to allow her to rent, but you can require that any damage the dog does, she has to fix it when she leaves, right at the end of her tenancy. So A says does not have to permit her to rent the unit because the building has a no pets policy. C must allow her to rent, but could increase the customary security. No, you can't. Can't increase the security deposit because they're disabled or they have a seeing eye dog. Must allow her to rent, but she can be required to house the dog outside her unit. No, you can't. You can't require that the dog sleep outside the unit. A Fair Housing Violation Act in which two brokers encourage homeowners to sell because minority families are moving into the neighborhood is called what? This one's B, block busting. So what is block busting? Again, a fair housing violation, right, under the Federal Fair Housing Violation Act, in which two brokers encourage homeowners to sell, right? It's panic selling, right? Sell because minority families are moving into the neighborhood, right? That's called block busting. They're busting. Think about, so these are where, say, these brokers are in violation of the Federal Fair Housing because they're encouraging, move folks to move away. They're breaking up the block busting because they are saying that minority families are moving into neighborhoods. So that's called block busting when they're encouraging or kind of scaring people to think, oh, some minorities are moving into the neighborhood, so they're going to move out. It's called block busting. Redlining, so discrimination, yeah, but it's called block busting discrimination. C, redlining, no, redlining is more of a lender violation where the lender, circles a particular area and doesn't give out loans in that area. Steering is where, a realtor is violating, so it doesn't fit this one. The Federal Fair Housing Act covers what? This covers Delta, the sale of a single family residence handled by a broker. So Federal Fair Housing Act covers the sale of a single family residence handled by a broker. So single family homes, a lot of homes are single family homes. The Federal Fair Housing Act covers that. Does it cover the sale of single family residence by an owner who does not own more than 3? No. It's just period single family residence handled by a broker. Rental of rooms in an owner occupied 4-family unit? No. Ownership of commercial property by a corporation? No. Okay, and that's pretty much that. We'll go on to the next unit. So next up is going to be Unit 22. We're going to talk about appraisal basics. So almost all lenders require an appraisal be performed before making a loan, right? So that's pretty typical. Before you even get a loan, they want to know how much it's worth. What's the appraisal? So real estate agents are not appraisers, but estimating property value is one of the day-to-day. Okay, so we're going to go over Unit 22. Talks about appraisal basics. So almost all lenders require an appraisal to be performed before making a loan. Real estate agents are not appraisers, but estimating property value is one of the day-to-day activities a real estate licensee is asked to perform for sellers and buyers. This unit is an introduction to appraisal process. So oftentimes whenever you're going to sell a home, you need to do what's called comps, comparative market analysis. It's not an appraisal, but it's close to how what appraiser was going to do is to figure out what's the value, right? So they'll look at other properties, and then they'll give you an evaluation of how much that property is going to be valued. So this unit, we're going to cover market value, market price, the cost, economic principles of value, appreciation, and depreciation. So you're going to need to do some independent study. I'm going to go over the unit summary and the unit quiz. So unit summary, make sure you review these key points for your exam. So an appraisal is an estimate of value at a given time, right? So whenever you get an appraisal done, it's how much is it, right? What's the value of the house? And it's only valid for a specific time, right? Typically 6 months. Market value is the amount a willing buyer would pay and a willing seller would accept in an arm's length transaction. So neither party acting under duress, right? That's called market value. How much is it going for today? An arm's length transaction, right, is one in which the parties are dealing from equal bargaining positions. Right? It's called arm's length transaction. Market price is the actual amount of money paid for the property in a transaction. Cost is the amount of money required to build a building at today's prices. The principle of supply and demand holds that value is affected by scarcity of a product and the desire for that item. The highest and best use of a property is the use that produces the greatest net return to the owner. Excess land is land that is not needed to support the highest and best use. The principle of substitution states that the maximum value of a property tends to be set by how much it costs to buy an equally desirable property. The principle of regression holds that the presence of lesser properties adversely affects the value of greater properties, while the principle of progression states that the value of lesser property is enhanced in the presence of greater properties. Externalities are factors that exist outside of a property that affect its value. Orientation is the placement of a building on its site in relation to the sun and prevailing winds, along with consideration for privacy and views. Value in use is the value of a property based on its utilization by a particular owner or group of owners. Earned increment is an increase in value due to the owner's efforts. Plottage or assemblage is an increase in value created by bringing individual parcels under one ownership. It's called plottage or assemblage. Deterioration is a loss in value due to physical wear and tear. Functional obsolescence is a loss in value due to outdated features, technological advances, or a poor floor plan. Right, that's what we call functional obsolescence. Say something's out of date, like some features out of date, or some technological advance in the house is out of date. It's a functional obsolescence, functionally obsolete. Economic obsolescence, right? Economic obsolescence is going to be a loss in value due to factors outside the property. So you got factors that are happening outside the property. It's called economic obsolescence. So number one, if a property is built using inferior grade building materials, this would directly result in what? Answer is A, functional obsolescence. So again, functionally obsolete, that's like if a property is built using inferior grade materials, right, technologically outdated materials, that's going to directly result in being functionally obsolescence, functionally obsolete. So B, physical deterioration, no. External obsolescence, no. Obsolescence, no. Reproduction cost, no. So functional obsolescence, there's some feature or there's using some material that we don't use in today's market. That's functional obsolescence. Number two, physical deterioration results from what? From Charlie, ordinary wear and tear. So physical deterioration is due to ordinary wear and tear. When you think of ordinary wear and tear, like, your tires on your car, you need to get replaced every, so many years, oil change. Physical is just physically deteriorating. That's a natural thing that happens. It's called ordinary wear and tear that, happens for parts over time. So physical deterioration results from what? From ordinary wear and tear. Obsolescence, no. Zoning changes, no. Poor floor plan, no. Number three, functional obsolescence is caused by alpha, inherent inadequacies in the property. So functional obsolescence, right? Some features out of date, some technologies out of date. Functionally obsolete is caused by inherent inadequacies in the property. Inherent inadequacies in the property. So is it caused by surrounding properties lowering value? No. Deferred maintenance? No. Deterioration of the foundation? No. So it's inherent inadequacies in the property. When appraising a home, an appraiser would make an adjustment for a poor floor plan due to what? So this was due to a functional obsolescence. Functional obsolescence. So what is functional obsolescence? Some features outdated in the home. So when appraising a home, an appraiser would make an adjustment for a poor floor plan due to functional obsolescence. So say you have a very old floor plan that we don't use in today's market, that appraiser is going to adjust the price based on functional obsolescence, being that it's functionally obsolete, right? That feature. Due to functional deterioration, no. Economic obsolescence, no. Physical depreciation, no. An appraiser is estimating the value of a commercial site and notes that there is excess land excess land means, bravo, there is land which is not needed for the highest and best use of the site. All right, so excess land means there is land which is not needed for the highest and best use of the site. There is land which is not needed for the highest and best use of the site. So an appraiser estimating the value of a commercial site and notes that there is excess land, right? So what does it mean? There is room for furniture improvements? No. The rent is more than the market suggests? No. The value of the land is higher than the value of the buildings? No. So again, an appraiser estimating the value of a commercial site and notes that there is excess land. Excess land is going to be where there's land which is not needed for the highest and best use of the site. A loss in value brought about by technological advances is what? B, bravo, functional obsolescence. So again, we really want you to know what functional obsolescence means. Loss in value because brought about by technological advances, right? So say your house is made out of certain materials, and that technology is no longer used in today's market. We use better technology to make the house. Some drywall, there's better drywall as in today. Just things like that. That's functional obsolescence again, right? Your house is functionally obsolete. Maybe your house is built in 1800s, something like that, 1900s, 1901, 1960, something like that. Some features are going to be functionally obsolete, functional obsolescence. So that's going to incur a loss in value. So is it due to deterioration? No. Economic obsolescence? No. Physical depreciation? No. The maximum value of a property tends to be set by how much it costs to buy an equally desirable and valuable property is a statement of the principle of, bravo, substitution. So the maximum value of a property tends to be set by how much it costs to buy an equally desirable and valuable property is a statement of the principle of substitution. So if I was to substitute, your house for that house, what would be the maximum value? So is it highest and best use? No. Supply and demand? No. Regression? No. So it would be substitution. The maximum value of a property tends to be set by how much it costs to buy an equally desirable valuable property is a statement of the principle of substitution. How a building is situated on a lot to take advantage of climate and views is what? Is bravo, orientation. So how it's oriented, right, is how a building is situated on a lot to take advantage of climate and views due to orientation. So is it due to directional growth? No. Development? No. Highest and best use? No. So it's orientation. An example of functional obsolescence is what? So this one's going to be 5 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. So leaky plumbing? No. Smoke from a nearby factory? No. An inoperable garage door opener? No. So 5 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. So regulations, code regulations for 5 bedrooms, you should have more than 1 bathroom, right? So that would be, some old house has maybe like 10 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, or 5 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. Well, codes, nowadays it requires, with additional bedrooms, more bathrooms. So that would be that you could say that the house has some functional obsolescence, and it would incur a loss in value when you do the appraisal. Market value is best defined as Bravo amount a willing seller would accept and a willing buyer would pay. So this is an amount a willing seller would accept and a willing buyer would pay. That's Bravo. So that's market value. Market value is how much the market, how much a buyer's going to pay, how much seller's going to sell, right? Amount a seller would accept and a willing buyer would pay. So price a buyer will pay under immediate conditions. No. Replacement cost of the property? No. Use, which will yield the highest net return? No. Number 11, the principle of externalities states that delta factors outside of a property affect value. Right, so the principles of externalities, what does that state? That means factors outside of a property affect value. That's the principles of externalities, right? Principles, external, right? That means factors outside of a property affect its value. So that's called the principles of externalities, saying that factors outside of a property, and which is very true because your house is valued depending on your neighborhood, right? So, and a similar like property. So if your neighborhood, your neighbor's house was really deteriorating, it's falling under the principle of externalities, which states that, factors outside of your property affect its value, which is very true in real estate. So is it lesser properties lower the value of greater properties? No. Values will be more stable in areas of similar properties? No. Future events will affect values? No. It just says factors outside of a property affect value. That's the principle of externalities. Number 12, deterioration results from what? Deferred maintenance, right? So say your property needs maintenance and you defer, right? That means you just push out to a later date. You defer maintenance, deterioration is going to happen, right? So say you need to, clean the gutters and you wait 20 years. And, you deferred maintenance for year after year after year, deterioration is going to start. So is it economic obsolescence? No. Functional obsolescence? No. Poor floor plans? No. So deterioration is going to result from deferred maintenance. You're just, you figure out something needs to be maintained and you just push out to next week, to next year, to never. So eventually, deterioration happens. Highest and best use can be defined as the use that will what? Bravo, yield the highest net return. So yield the highest net return. So that's highest and best use can be defined as the use that will yield the highest net return. Yield the highest net return. That's highest and best use. Yield the highest net return. So will you yield the highest gross return? No. It's yield the highest net, right? The highest net return, that's highest and best use, highest net return. Will it give an owner the best view? No, that's orientation. Will it bring in the highest rent? No. So yield the highest net return is highest and best use, and that can be defined as the use that will yield the highest net return. The value of a property based on its utilization by a particular owner or group of owners is what? Charlie, value in use. Value in use. So this is the value of a property based on its utilization by a particular owner or a group of owners. Is called value in use. If you think about it, these owners of a particular property, the values depends on the usage. That's called value in use. It's called market value? No. Assessed value? No. Highest and best use? No. So value in use is the value of a property based on its utilization by a particular owner or a group of owners. Number 15, the appraisal principle that states the value of a lesser property. The value of a lesser property is enhanced by the presence of greater properties is what? Is progression, right? Alpha progression. So progression is, again, the appraisal principle that states the value of a lesser property is going to be enhanced by the presence of greater properties. It's called progression. So you can always, fix and flip homes. There's a lesser property. You can enhance it by progression. You're progressing up the value, fixing and flipping. Regression, no. Externalities, no. Conformity, no. A house is located in a neighborhood that suffers from an excessive amount of smoke and dust from nearby factories. The house suffers from what? This one's going to be bravo, economic obsolescence. So functional obsolescence, no. Functional deterioration, no. Physical deterioration, no. It's not functional obsolescence because there's no feature inside the house that makes it obsolete. But economic obsolescence, because there's a poor area that suffers because there's a nearby smoke factory that's going to affect the nearby neighborhood. So that's economic obsolescence. If there was some feature in the house that was being deteriorated, that'd be functional obsolescence, but in this case it's not. So a house located in a neighborhood that suffers from an excessive amount of smoke and dust from nearby factories, the house suffers from economic obsolescence. Bravo. Market price is the delta, is the amount in terms of money paid for the property. So that's market price. That's the amount in terms of money paid for the property. That's, market price. That's what us realtors, we value based on the market today, market value. That's the amount in terms of money paid for the property. So how much paid for the property is market price. Market price, is that true market value? No. Is it the best price bid at public sale? No. Is it the price asked for the property in an open market? No. It's the amount in terms of money paid for the property. Which of the following types of depreciation is the most difficult to correct? This one's going to be bravo, economic obsolescence. So we have the example of house, right, was getting excessive amount of smoke and dust from nearby factories. That's going to be very difficult to fix, right? Because you got to, move your house from the nearby factories, right, which is nearly impossible. So that depreciation is most difficult to correct, right? That's going to be very difficult to correct. So is it functional obsolescence? No. Technological upgrades in the house. I mean, you can upgrade anything pretty quickly, easily. But having an economic obsolescence, like your house being near a smoke stack factory, where you're getting a lot of dust and smoke in that area, that's going to be pretty hard to correct. right? That depreciation is very difficult to correct. Is it so? Physical deterioration? No. Wear and tear? No. All those are easy to fix. Wear and tear, physical deterioration, functional obsolescence, they're easier to fix than having an economic obsolescence, right? Because you can't really impact. You can't really go out to Ace Hardware and buy a bolt and fix something at your house, or fix like a factory that's near you that quick. A home is nice, clean, and sharp. It is located in a neighborhood with junk cars and trash cans and trash on the front lawns. In the cost approach, this fact would be considered what? What? This would be economic obsolescence. So again, a home is nice, clean, and sharp. It's located in a neighborhood with junk cars and trash on the front lawns. In the cost approach, this fact would be considered economic obsolescence. Again, you have your house and it's in a junk neighborhood where people have their junk cars out, trash on the front lawn. So yours is one nice house amongst a bunch of junk houses. That's going to be economic obsolescence. It's not functional obsolescence because nothing in your house is functionally obsolete. Maybe it's a 2024, right? 2024 house, right? Everything's up to date. There's no functional obsolescence there. Maybe all the houses are 2024, right? Your house 24, all the other houses running 2024, and it's just you keep up your house and all your neighbors are not. So that's economic obsolescence. So a home is nice, clean, and sharp, is located in a neighborhood with junk cars and trash on the front lawns. In the cost approach, this fact would be functional obsolescence, no. Physical deterioration, no. Incurable devaluation, no. An increase in value created by joining smaller parcels into one large single parcel is what? A plottage or assemblage. Plottage or assemblage. So you got plottage or assemblage is where you have an increase in value created by joining smaller parcels. When you got one parcel, you join that to make one giant parcel into a larger single parcel. That's called plottage or assemblage. So is it called merging? No. Principle of anticipation? No. Subdividing? No. 21. No reasonable person will pay more for an item than that for which a reasonable duplicate can be purchased is a statement of the principle of substitution. Bravo. So substitution is when a reasonable person, where a reasonable person will pay for a duplicate can be purchased in place of the, an original, right? So no reasonable person will pay more for an item that for which a reasonable duplicate can be purchased is a statement of the principle of substitution. So is it duplication? No, that's my carbon copy, but is it a substitution? Yes. Regression? No. Conformity? No. Anticipation? No. So substitution. When you're substituting things, substitution, that's the principle, that's the statement of the principle of substitution where, a reasonable person would pay more for an item than for which a reasonable duplicate can be purchased. 22. A property suffers from functional obsolescence. Most of the damage results from issues which are curable. This means that alpha, it can be restored at a reasonable cost. So it can be restored at a reasonable cost is where a property suffers from functional obsolescence. Maybe the house uses old technology, old materials. Most of the damage results from issues which are curable. This means that it can be restored at a reasonable cost. So say something happens and some wall gets chipped. You go to Ace Hardware, Home Depot, Lowe's, buy something, come back, fix it. It can be restored at a reasonable cost. That's functional obsolescence. So B, it cannot be restored at a reasonable cost. No. The deterioration is beyond repair. No. The neighborhood is economically obsolete. No. So functional obsolescence, and you have something that's just really curable quickly, means it can be restored at a reasonable cost. All right, next up, 23, which is appraisal comparison and cost approaches and income property terminology. So in this unit, we're going to discuss comparison and cost approaches to appraisals, as well as introducing and defining terms relating to income property. The income approach to appraising investment property will be discussed in Unit 24. So we're going to cover comparison approach, adjustments to comp properties, cost approach and math formulas, appraisal reports, hybrid appraisals, real estate agent evaluations, appraisal licensing, certification, income property terminology. So you're going to have to do some independent studying. And I'm going to go over the unit summary and the unit quiz. All right, so for this unit summary, you need to review these key points. So the comparison approach is also called the market data approach, right? So if you hear something called comparison approach, it's called the market data. Here, you might hear realtors say, oh, I'm going to run comps. That's the comparison approach. And it's also called the what? Market data approach. And it's a direct sales comparison approach. So we're going to compare the subject property that we're going to sell to like any other property within about a mile radii and within that sold within the last 6 months. And we're going to compare how those houses sold and determine an evaluation appraisal on the on the subject property. So we're going to make some adjustments. Adjustments are going to be made in the comparable properties to bring them in line with the subject property. No adjustment is needed when a comparable property's features is the same as the subject properties. So can you compare a one-story house to a two-story? No. One story needs to be compared to one story. Two-story, two-story. Can you compare that same house, say if it's a 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom, to a 8-bedroom, 10-bathroom? No. You have to have similar like properties, the same features. Can you compare that house with the house with no pool? No. Has to have the same features. So the formula for the cost approach is going to be the building cost minus the depreciation plus the land value. And that's going to be equal to the appraised value. Square footage of the living area excludes the garages, patios, etc. So oftentimes, if you're looking at what's the square footage of the house, say it's 1,000 square feet. Did that include the garage? No. Did that include the patio? No. It's the livable square footage, where you're living at, the livable, with HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. So typically garage patios, they're not livable. Well, they're not livable square footage, so you don't count that. Square footage under roof includes all areas under the roof line. So if you wanted to map out the square footage, you would typically use that roof line, exclude the patios, exclude the garage, and that's going to be the square footage area. Two types of appraisal reports are going to be Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, URAR, and the Narrative Appraisal. Hybrid appraisals, they're going to include drive-by appraisals, desktop appraisals, automated valuation models, computer-generated appraisals. Real estate agents often prepare competitive market analysis to assist clients in determining value. So as agents, we run comps, right? We run market analysis approaches, and determine the market data, right? So a real estate licensee may prepare a property evaluation, and it's called a broker price opinion. So if you hear broker price opinion, for a fee, but may not call any evaluation an appraisal. So even though appraisers will typically call us and ask for our what is it our comps, right? They want to see what we came up with the evaluation, but it's not an appraisal because an appraisal is done by an appraiser. So we just do what's called a comparative market analysis to determine the value, and that's what we list the property at. So the fees for a broker price opinion must be paid the licensee broker. The three types of appraisers are licensed appraiser, certified residential appraiser, certified general appraiser. So appraisal management companies act as a firewall between the lender and the appraiser to protect against loan fraud. So gross scheduled income is the income a property would produce if 100% occupied. It's called the gross income. Effective gross income is the actual income collected. Operating expenses are those incurred in the actual operation of the property. Loan payments are not operating expenses. Net operating income is the effective gross income minus the operating expenses. Debt service is the principal and interest paid to lenders. Cash flow before taxes is net operating income minus the debt service. Cash on cash return is the cash flow before taxes divided by the owner's down payment or equity. So number one, the appraisal approach, which uses the replacement cost less depreciation added to the land value, is what? Is bravo, cost, right? So the appraisal approach, which uses the replacement costs less the depreciation added to the land value, is the cost. All right, is it the market data? No. Income? No. Capitalization? No, it is cost. So market approach, which uses the replacement cost less depreciation added to the land value, is cost. Number two, for which of the following properties would an appraiser use the reproduction cost approach? So this one's D, historical house. Historical house. So for which of the following properties would an appraiser use the reproduction cost approach? So when they have to reproduce it, it's called historical house, history. Is it a commercial building? No. Rental? No. Garage? No. So which of the following properties would an appraiser use to reproduce for the reproduction cost approach as the historical house? You have a small apartment complex for $275,000. You finance 80% of the purchase price on an interest-only loan at 5.5%. Your net operating income is 27 grand. What is your cash on cash return? Cash on cash. So this one's going to be delta 28%. So you need to do some math on that. Upon the market data approach, the subject property has a fireplace, which you estimate to add $1,000 in value. Comp number one does not have a fireplace, but does have a pool, which you estimate to add $2,000 in value. Which way do you adjust the sales price? So answer is delta, down $1,000. So let's go again. Using the data approach, the subject property has a fireplace, which you estimate to add $1,000 in value. Right, so fireplace, about you add 1,000. Comp number one doesn't have a fireplace, okay, but does have a pool, okay, and your subject property doesn't have a pool, which you estimate to add $2,000 in value. So again, these are just things where work values, example numbers. But say your pool, say you add $2,000 in value. Which way do you adjust the sales price? Well, you would, because the pool is 2,000 and minus the 1,000, so you would adjust the sale price down $1,000. The difference between a building's replacement cost and its present value is delta depreciation. So the difference between a building's replacement cost and its present value is depreciation. So is it use value? No. Market value? No. Regression? No. So depreciation, when it depreciates, goes down. That's the difference between a building's replacement cost and its present value. It's called depreciation. Present value, and then having to replace that. When market data is lacking and the property has no income, the appraisal approach most likely to be used is the what? Cost, right? Bravo is the cost approach. So say, you have a church. There's no other church around it, right? It's not generating property. There's no income. Most likely to be used could be a cost approach, right? There's data that's lacking and the property has no income. The appraisal approach most likely to be used as the cost. Is it comparison? No. Capitalization? No. Market data? No. Property has a gross income of $250,000, expenses of $100,000. If an investor buys the property, puts $700,000 down, and the annual percentage payment is $90,000, what is the investor's cash on cash return? So here the answer is bravo, 8.57%. Number 8, a real estate agent may not perform which type of valuation? This one's going to be C, URAR. So can an agent do a broker price opinion? Yes. A competitive market analysis, right? A CMA, comps, right? Competitive market analysis? Yes. A URAR? No. Automated valuation model estimate of value? Yes. So automated valuation model estimate of value is just fancy word for, comps. But we cannot do a URAR appraisal, but we can do comps, broker price opinion, automated model of value estimate. I mean, at the end of the day, they're not appraisals; they're estimates of value. Only an appraiser can do an appraisal, which would be at the end of the day the actual value, right? Brokers, realtors, we just have an estimate of value. That would be market data. All right, all the following are appraisals in which no inspection of the interior of the building is made except Delta FHA appraisal. So a drive-by appraisal, no. Desktop appraisal, no. Automated valuation appraisal, no. FHA appraisal, right, requires 3.5% down payment minimum. So all the following are appraisals in which no inspection of the interior buildings of the building is made except FHA. Why? Well, FHA is a government-based program. Anything dealing with the government, they're going to want to do an inspection of the interior of the building. So all the following appraisals in which no inspection of the interior building was made except FHA. So a drive-by appraisal, when they drive by, it's called a drive-by appraisal. Do they do the drive-by appraisal? Do you inspect the interior of the house? No. Desktop appraisal, that's us on the computer. No, you don't look at the interior, just look at the exterior. Automated valuation appraisal, no. So D, FHA appraisals, they're going to have a real appraiser come inside the house, look inside the house, and tell you what's the value. If a banker asks a broker to give a price evaluation on a property for a couple who is getting a home equity loan, the broker, Bravo, may provide it as long as he discloses that it is his opinion. So again, when brokers or salespersons, realtors, we give our estimates of value, right? They're just our opinion. They're not actual appraisals by appraisers. So A says may not provide it because it is an appraisal. No, may provide it, but may not charge for the evaluation. No, may not provide it because the broker is not an appraiser. No. You just need to disclose that it's your opinion. So you can give your comps, comparable market analysis. When an appraiser is performing an appraisal on a property, what is the minimum number of comparables to be used under the direct sales comparison? The direct sales comparison approach. So it is Charlie, it is 3. So 3 is the minimum number of houses. So here's your subject property. You need to compare it to 1, 2, 3, 3 other houses of similar like build, like almost a 1-to-1, with a 1 mile radius, sold in the last 6 months, to do your comparable market analysis. Net operating income minus debt service equals what? This one's going to be cash flow before taxes. So cash flow before taxes is where you take your net operating income and you minus the debt service, right? And now you have your cash flow before taxes, right? So you still got to pay tax on it, but it's your cash flow before taxes. So is it your gross schedule income? No. Your effective gross income? No. Your operating expenses? No. Which of the following is not used in the market approach of appraising? Not used in the market approach for appraising. It is delta functional depreciation. So it's not even a word, it's functional obsolescence. So these doesn't make sense. Not used in the approach of appraising. So what is used in the market approach of appraising? Terms of sale. Yeah, you always have to have beginning and end date of the contracts. And you have the terms and conditions. The date of sales. Yep, beginning and end. When does it start? When does it end? Amenities, right? What are the utilities? Things like that. In preparing an estimate of value for a 30-year-old house, an appraiser will most likely use which of the following approaches to value? This one's C, market data. So market data is going to be preparing an estimate of value for a 30-year-old house, and that's pretty much what they'll typically use. We generate, when we do our comps and compare market analysis, we compare other houses, we use market data. So replacement cost, no. Reproduction cost, no. Income, no. When using the comparison method, an appraiser adjusts the price of the what? Of the comparables, delta. So when using the comparison method, an appraiser adjusts the price of the comparables. So do they adjust the price of the subject property? No. The capitalization value? No. The GRM? No. The comps? Yes. So that is when using the comparison. When you're comparing that comparison method, an appraiser is going to adjust the comps. What is not considered to be an operating expense on income property? It is delta mortgage payments. So the answer is D. So what is not considered to be an operating expense on income property? Mortgage payments. So mortgage payments, they're not considered to be an operating expense on income property. So is it property tax? No. Insurance? No. Repairs and maintenance? No. Mortgage payments, think about mortgage payments, they're not considered to be an operating expense on income property. So, you still got to pay your mortgage payments. You don't get to count them as operating expenses, even though you'd love to. But it's on income property, so you can't include the mortgage payments. Property tax, yeah, you can include those as operating expenses. Insurance, yeah. Repairs and maintenance, definitely. Which of the following is the type of appraisal usually required on a commercial property? So this one's going to be Charlie. Narrative appraisal. Narrative appraisal. So narrative appraisal is the type of appraisal usually required on a commercial property. So narrative appraisal is usually required on a commercial property. Narrative appraisal for a commercial. URAR form appraisal? No. Broker price opinion? No. Automated valuation appraisal? No. Which of the three appraisal approaches takes into account depreciation? So this one is cost. So there's three appraisal approaches. Which one takes into account depreciation? So the cost approach takes into account depreciation. So income, no. Market, no. Highest and best use, no. Cash on cash return would involve which of the following concepts? Leverage. All right, answer is Charlie. So leverage. So cash on cash return would involve which of the following concepts? So economic depreciation, no. Adjusted gross income, no. Leverage, yes. Economic life, no. So leverage, again, cash on cash return would involve which of the following concepts? It would be involved leverage. Which of the following is determined by measuring the exterior dimensions of a home, including garages, patios, and entryways? So this one's going to be Bravo. Square footage under roof. Square footage under roof is determined by measuring exterior dimensions of a home, including garage, patios, and entryways. Now, typically, when you look at the square footage of a house, they don't include the garage, they don't include patios or the entryways. But if you talk about square footage under roof, that term, that will include garage, patios, and entryways. So, square footage of living area, no. Front footage area, no. Heated and cooled areas, no. An agent evaluating a residential property for a listing presentation would most likely use what? Alpha, direct sales comparison approach. Direct sales comparison approach. So an agent evaluating a residential property for a listing presentation would most likely use direct sales comparison approach. So again, an agent direct sales comparison approach is used when evaluating a residential property for a listing presentation, and they use the direct sales comparison. So I use typically the direct sales comparison approach. You want to use a minimum of 3 comps. So replacement cost approach, no. Cost approach, no. And income approach, no. An appraiser would most likely use the market data approach in estimating the value of delta parcel of vacant land. So on a parcel, you got vacant land, nothing on it. Parcel of vacant land, an appraiser would most likely use the market data approach in estimating the value for a parcel of vacant land. So would it be for an oil refinery? No. Gas station? No. Municipal building? No. But a parcel of vacant land? Yes. So the appraiser would most likely use the market data approach to estimate the value of parcel of vacant land. So for oil refinery, would you use market data? No. Gas station? No. Municipal building? No. If an agent feels that an appraiser estimated the value to be lower than expected, or that there are errors in the appraisal, the agent may request what? Alpha reconsideration. I haven't run into this, but if typically you do your market data approach and you do your comps, you get a number, say 400,000. The appraisal wants it. They look at that. They come back. It's around the same number. Sometimes it could be lower, higher, but it's usually around the same number. And say it's much lower and you think that's wrong, well, then you can request a what? Reconsideration. You can get that appraiser to reconsider. Maybe you've added a bunch of stuff that they didn't have. So the agent, can they request a comparative market analysis? No, you should have done that before. Highest and best use report? No. Feasibility study? No. Just ask him to reconsider it, right? Reconsideration. For the best appraisal of residential property, right? For the best appraisal of residential property, the appraiser would use Charlie, a similar neighborhood. So for the best appraisal of residential property, the appraiser would use a similar neighborhood. A similar neighborhood. Would they use a different neighborhood? No. The neighborhood adjacent to the subject neighborhood? No. Only the cost method? No. So when you're doing, because all agents and all brokers, realtors, we usually do a comparative market analysis approach. And what we do is we compare your subject property to a similar neighborhood. Typically the same neighborhood, right? A company that acts as an intermediary between a lender and an appraiser is what? Is Delta, an appraisal management company. Appraisal and management company. That appraisal management company is a company that acts as an intermediary between a lender and an appraiser. So yeah, it's an appraisal management company. Is it a full service appraisal company? No. Real estate brokerage company? No. Appraisal evaluation company? No. The greatest weight would be given to the cost approach of appraising a church, right? So say you got a church. What kind of appraisal would you do? Well, you do the cost approach, right? How much would it cost to rebuild that entire church? The greatest weight. Now you can do other appraisals, but the best one is going to be the cost approach. That's the greatest weight would be given to the cost approach of appraising a church. So cost approach and a church, they go hand in hand. Apartment building, no. Old residence, no. Old commercial building, no. All right, next up, we'll go over Unit 24.